Today's scripture reading is Psalm 15. You can found in your pew books, page 495. Who shall abide in God's sanctuary? A psalm of David. O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart, who do not slander with their tongue and do no evil to their friends, nor take up a reproach against their neighbors. In those eyes the wicked are despised, but who honor those who fear the Lord, who stand by their oath even to their hurt, who do not lend money at interest and do not take a bribe against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be moved.
Scripture reading comes from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. I'll be reading from the Common English Bible, so if you're following along with the Pew Bible, you'll notice a fairly significant difference in the translation. So you can pay attention to that and see where the sermon is going from there. But Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. And now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up a mountain. He sat down, and his disciples came to him. He taught them, saying, "Happy are people who are hopeless, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Happy are people who grieve, because they will be made glad. And happy are people who are humble, because they will inherit the earth. Happy are people who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, because they will be fed until they are full. Happy are people who show mercy, because they will receive mercy. Happy are people who have pure hearts, because they will see God. Happy are people who make peace, because they will be called God's children. Happy are people whose lives are harassed because they are righteous, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Happy are you when people insult you and harass you and speak all kinds of bad and false things about you, all because of me. Be full of joy and be glad, because you have a great reward in heaven. In the same way, people harass the prophets who came before you." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. And so the song "Shiny Happy People" by REM is one of my favorite songs from the 90s. It's just very upbeat and positive and focused on the concept of being truly happy, shiny people. I feel that I also jive with it because I am typically an eternal optimist. I tend to view things on the positive side and view the glass half full a majority of the time. I feel life's too short to dwell on the negative or to get dragged down in the muck and the mire of small annoyances or grievances that we might feel or experience in life. As such, I tend to lean towards and look for, even potentially create, positive aspects of life. Perhaps that too is why God has given me such a deep, rich, and amazing sense of humor that's also a little corny and sarcastic at times as well. As a result, I thought it would be a great idea to go through these traditional Beatitudes, one by one, to just see how we could find the happiness that is described here. And I should also mention that in previous translations, these were always kind of translated as "blessed are," right? So the Common English Bible chose the word "happy," so we'll kind of uncover that a little bit to see why we went with happiness as opposed to blessed, and then kind of vice versa. But it should be noted that the context in which these Beatitudes were given was meant more of a reassurance to everyone that was kind of gathered around and listening to Jesus preach. It was a reminder that they too mattered in life, and that heaven and God and God's kingdom were approachable to anyone willing to listen and to live the life that Christ was describing in these Beatitudes. So they're not necessarily a straight rubric of how one might find happiness and how we just keep that perpetual happiness in life, but they do encourage us to look at our own life and find these little moments or find these different ways that we could maybe get to happiness in some form or fashion. So let's start with the first one. Happy are people who are hopeless, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Now, what in the world does this mean, and why would people that are hopeless consider themselves happy? And I feel in some ways that Christ is speaking to everyone. I'm sure that there's times in everyone's life where we've felt some kind of sense of hopelessness in one form or fashion. We might feel hopeless that we're stuck at a certain job or career or vocation in life when we're desperate for a change. We might feel hopeless that we will just have to financially struggle for a majority, if not all, of our lives. We might feel hopeless. If we've been diagnosed with some disease or some ailment that we just can't seem to shed in life. Now, these are just a few ways that hopelessness can kind of creep into our lives. And now finding this hopelessness no longer means that we have no hope whatsoever. Christ, though, is saying that though we may feel hopeless, we do have the kingdom of heaven. We have that promise of eternal hope to hold on to. It's one that can continue to drive us and motivate us and encourage us and strengthen us and give us the perseverance we might need to get through these moments of hopelessness in our life. And therefore, when we're feeling down or devoid of hope, we can look toward God, or God's promise and God's presence of God's kingdom, whether that's realized now or at some future point in our life. We can rest assured that it is and has been and always will be a persistent presence in our life. God and God's kingdom. And the next statement proclaims, "Happy are people who grieve, because they will be made glad." Now, what in the world is Jesus talking about? He talks about people that are hopeless will find happiness, or people that will grieve will be made glad. That doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense to us. Rarely, if ever, do we associate or equate happiness to grieving. That doesn't seem possible in any way, shape, or form. But first things first, let us remember to who Christ was preaching to on that day. The people that did not fall into the classification of the Jewish religious elite, or the people that were the upper to-dos of the Roman society and empire, were the people in which Christ was preaching. Now, this was focused towards the people that felt as if they were lesser or oppressed and being taken advantage of. So this gave them a reason through that grief to find some sort of blessing or some form of happiness, or some kind of future hope in which they could hold on to. So I feel the sentiment kind of boils down to a strong feeling of knowing that we can find comfort in God. We know that God grieves with us too. So when we're grieving, God is grieving. I know that won't provide us happiness, but that can give us support and comfort, and knowing that we're not alone in our grief. You see, our hope lies with the Lord. And through that hope and through that grief and that despair, we can find some sort of gladness or some sort of positivity to latch onto and get us through those tough patches in life. So essentially, even though we grieve, we know and are aware of God's presence and God's promises. And that, for us, is extremely reassuring. Next, we address the statement, "Happy are people who are humble, because they will inherit the earth." Yes, now this is something we all could relate to. Yes, we're all extremely humble people. I know I'm the humblest person that I know, and that is a fact, right? Now, I think we all could stand to use a little more humility in life. Humility can go a long way. It can make us feel better, and we can get to certain points of happiness through this humility in life. For starters, it encourages us to take a viewpoint of other people and maybe see them as important as us, if not more important, but not to our own detriment. In fact, many psychological studies have been conducted on this understanding and this concept of being humble and humility in life. So there were a couple things that have come out of this research, and they're not limited to these things, but these are some I'd like to highlight of how humility can really carry us certain ways in life. First, it's a soothing of the soul. So people that are known to cope a little easier with anxiety about mortality are ones that are humble. So as opposed to focusing on the fear of death, humble people try to find a useful and helpful perspective of life to live it a little bit better. Humility also provides a peace of mind and helps one stay away from the stress and the pressure of trying to become too popular or powerful or respected by others. So we just take that off our plate. If we're in school or at work, we don't have to worry about being the popular one, or being the one with the most power, or being the one that's the most respected in the room. Humility kind of says, just get rid of that, and we can be a humble yet still confident person. Humility also can relieve you from attempts of being more significant. It can make you feel comfortable without lacking any sort of self-confidence. So it's not saying to doubt yourself or say, I'm worthless or I'm nothing. No, you can still have that self-confidence, but also view people in an equal light and say, they're important too, and they also matter, and so does their life. The humility is a key to excellent leadership as well. And one might notice that humble leaders are not only better liked, they're much more effective. A humble leadership implies that leaders are able to admit mistakes, and spotlight followers' strengths, and find suitable models for teaching what they need to teach to those people that need to learn and follow. And humility also increases one's self-control. It improves one's work performance, and humble people tend to be more helpful. And see, all of these can be had when we enact more humility in our life. And maybe we'll find ourselves being a little more helpful, or having a little more self-confidence even in ourselves through this humility, oddly enough. Maybe we'll garner more respect through this humble outlook and focus in life. So we should strive to do that in whatever way we can. The next statement proclaims, "Happy are people who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, because they will be fed until they are full." And now I'm willing to bet most of us have experienced hunger, especially if the pastor preaches past 12:30 on a Sunday morning, right? We know what that hunger feels like. We want to get to lunch, or we know what that thirst kind of feels like as well. When we're thirsty, we need a beverage to satiate that thirst. But what about when it comes to righteousness? How are we hungry or thirsty for righteousness? Well, we all know full well what it means to experience that thirst and that hunger, but when it comes to righteousness, God is saying, you should seek to do what is right. You should have this hunger and this thirst to always do what is the good thing and right thing to do in life. And naturally, we won't be able to do this all the time. Nobody's perfect except for Jesus Christ. But that doesn't mean we have to stop trying. We can still thirst or hunger to try to do the right thing when the moment calls for it. And by doing that, and if we do it consistently enough, we'll feel full. And we won't have to thirst or hunger for this righteousness any longer. And the next statement we come to reads, "Happy are people who show mercy, because they will receive mercy." Now for starters, then, let's kind of focus on the definition of mercy as one can find it. It's defined as compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. Basically, then, this boils down to the most basic of relationships. Bosses, parents, grandparents, friends, spouses, peers, etc. Anytime we have the power to punish or harm someone else, and we choose not to, even if it might be justified, we're enacting mercy. So I invite you to reflect and think for a moment. Was there a time in your life that you were shown mercy? If so, how did that make you feel? Did it make you feel a little more relaxed or at ease or comfortable? Did it kind of lift your spirits to know that, hey, I made this mistake, or maybe I did something wrong, and yet this person has shown me mercy? At the same time, has there ever been a time in your life where you have not received mercy? And how did that make you feel? Well, probably a little hurt, a little disappointed, maybe caused some grief or some pain in your life. Well, whatever the case, God is calling us, if we have the chance and opportunity to offer mercy, then we should do it. And we should share that freely with those around us, whether we feel it's justified or not. And that's the challenging part. It's not easy to give mercy out all the time, especially if there were some dire consequences to fall from that. But God's saying, find this mercy and you will receive it as well, and you will find the happiness through that. The next item in the happiness line states, "Happy are those who have pure hearts, because they will see God." And now a pure heart can be a little subjective, and while complete and true purity is almost an impossibility, we should try to work on the filter for the contents of our hearts. We should find ways to purify it and reach certain levels of holiness. So just kind of like a water filter at home or on a fridge, it has certain things that go through that and make the water a little more pure as it comes out, right? So we need to work on that in our lives as well. So that purity and that kind of purifying process comes through how we act towards others. The kindness and the love that we share, Maybe our activity or involvement in the church, our regular attendance here on Sunday mornings, our attendance at Sunday school, or just how we interact with people in the world. And that's how we can get that purification process started on our hearts. And in doing so, we'll be able to fully see God. And see God through others, see God in our life, and see God working in many wonderful, blessed ways. And next we have, happy are people who make peace, because they will be called God's children. Now, this one should seem fairly straightforward, and for the most part it is. But it should be noted that making peace should be a primary goal in our life. Whether this is making peace with relationships that have become strained or hurt over the years, or ones that we've lost maybe in past years, or this is making peace with decisions that we have made or actions that we have taken in life. The point is we need to find a way to get to peace. A peace with previous relationships. Maybe it's giving out mercy. Maybe it's coming and admitting someone that you made a mistake, or say, I'm sorry, or hey, we haven't talked in years, so let's talk and catch up. Because our relationship matters, and this hurt and this turmoil and this pain that's kind of going on and present here, we need to heal that. We need to find a way through the peace. So making peace should be a top priority in our life. And we, of course, will be happier and better off for that as well. So we should go to whatever realm in our life there is that turmoil or friction, and make peace or make amends with that and try to heal and move on, or whether it's letting go or whether it's offering and giving forgiveness. Find a way to make peace. And lastly, we have, happy are people whose lives are harassed because they are righteous, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Now, who here likes to be harassed? Nobody? Well, that's kind of strange. No, not really. We don't like to be harassed, right? Who wants that? Nobody does in life. And with the way that things are in the world right now, harassment can be a very big deal. And so we don't want it either way, whether someone's shouting at us or doing things that we don't want them doing to us or for us or at us. We just have to be very careful. And no one likes this. And what is Jesus talking about here? Well, my understanding of harassment, if you have a habit that you're doing something, let's say every morning I get up and brush my teeth, and that's the first thing I do, right? And someone comes to me and says, Pastor Chris, it'd be greater if you started brushing your teeth after you ate breakfast. That would be better. And I say, well, no, hold on. I don't want to change. I've been doing this for years. I need to do it this continual way. And besides, have you smelled my breath when I wake up in the morning? I can knock down a whole forest. So it's better for the world if I just brush my teeth first. But you get this resistance. You get people that harass you about saying, no, you really need to do it this way. We're just creatures of habit. We like doing things the way we've done them, or the way they've kind of gone in life. So if you sometimes feel or get harassment or pushback or negativity, and maybe it means you're going in the right direction, particularly when it comes to Christ. If you haven't known Christ long in your life, or you're new to Christ, and someone says, well, why are you following this Jesus guy? What does he know? Or why are you doing this? I'm going to harass you till you change and go back to your old ways and get rid of this Jesus Christ guy. Well, that's not the best course of action. So this resistance, this pushback, this kind of form of harassment might mean you're doing the right thing. But we can only kind of know that if we're purifying our hearts, if we have this thirst and this hunger for righteousness, if we're making peace and offering mercy. That kind of leads us to this step that we know we're doing the right thing. So maybe this harassment is a sign that we are on the right path. So we shouldn't celebrate, or it won't really bring us happiness per se, but it's a reminder that we're going in the right direction. So please, this morning, if I'm leaving after the benediction or walking down the aisle, don't harass me as I go out. That's not the whole gist of this story, right? That won't bring me happiness. So just want to make sure you understand we're on the same page with this harassment deal. So ultimately, the big takeaway I have for today and this message is kind of twofold. One, that we have a different understanding of just what happiness is. It's not kind of this fleeting emotion that we eat a chocolate cupcake and, I'm happy in this moment and we're good to go. It's kind of a lifelong journey of kind of sustaining perpetual happiness that we can get to through following and enacting these Beatitudes in life. They help us kind of find this ultimate true happiness in our life. And we're hopefully finding better ways to really get there through these and through enacting them and maybe setting them as goals in our life. And so all of these statements can sincerely make a difference in our own life. And so maybe we should make at least one or two of them a future goal or present goal for us in life. And maybe we say to ourselves, I can be more merciful towards other people. Or maybe I can make peace with all these hurt and strained relationships in life. Or maybe I can thirst or hunger for righteousness just a little bit more and focus on doing the right thing day in and day out in life. Or whatever the case may be, you try to find one or two that you can follow or try to implement into your life today. So these can apply to anyone. When Christ was preaching this sermon, yes, he was speaking to a particular crowd, but they can apply to anyone that's willing to listen. Anyone in this world that wants to read these and enact these and follow these in their life. Christ is saying, listen, my child, follow these and you can find a great and wonderful and bountiful life. So they can give us strength and encouragement and goals to aim for as we walk this Christian faith and go along this journey as a church or as individuals. No, we'll not be happy 100% of the time. That's not what God is saying. What we can learn, though, is how to work towards that to make us have a better life and improve the lives of others. Through this happiness, through the humility, through the righteousness, through the peace, through the mercy, and through all of those. God truly wants us to be shiny, happy people, just as REM said. Amen.